Good day and welcome to all you watching. This is On the Hot Seat with Kouthar D on Deen channel, and in front of me I have a wonderful, phenomenal lady, and her name is Hijaabi Johnson Kasim, all the way from Mustadafin, and today she's going to be telling me a little bit about Mustadafin and the broad spectrum that they cover. That's right, we are on the hot seat with Kouthar D, and I have a brilliant person sitting just across me. Her name is Auntie Hijaabi Johnson Kasim. Assalamu alaikum to Auntie Hijaabi, and she's all the way from Mustadafin.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How did Mustadafin start, and how did you get involved with Mustadafin?
Well, Mustadafin Foundation was established, I would say, in the 80s, and particularly formatted in 1986. With the Crossroads violence, and I was one of the people who were working at that time as one of the pupils and students, and it was a whole diverse group of people, and I was one of those diverse group of people who established the Mustadafin Foundation.
So you come a long way with him.
Yes.
That's so nice. I don't know what Mustadafin means. Do you know what Mustadafin means? Because I'm sure a lot of other people also don't know what
Mustadafin is an Arabic word, and it means oppressed, destitute, and deprived.
Okay, and how long has Mustadafin been in existence? Counting from...
Officially, we're 32 years old.
Unofficially,
we're probably 34 years old, but officially, we're 32 years old. From a bank statement, from the fact that we officially opened an accounts and all that, we're officially 32 years old.
And how did you incorporate yourself with Mustadafin? How did it all go about?
Well, 86, when Mustadafin, with Crossroads violence, with the fighting and the Vaduka, that history, we were working in the area, as I said, with a diverse group of people, particularly with women and children, because they were the ones who were affected the most. So the Mustadafin Foundation's program of action, and I remember Dr. Nafsa was the doctor who actually worked within from the health perspective of the organization, and trained with Sakla a group of healthcare workers. And if you look, and in particularly to look at children and women regarding undernourishment. That time it was the undernourished, the TB, and in 92 you saw the changes within the organization as well. But I left in 87.
Okay.
So if you look at our history, there's been a group of people who made sure that the work had happened, and particularly concentrating on, like I mentioned earlier, on women and children, seeing that they are fed, that they are clothed. We brought the people out of the areas of Nyanga Bush into the NGC offices, the mosques, the churches. So everybody played an important role, and there was a collective response from our community to do what is right and do justice. And that is something that we would like to advocate again, is that unity where people see the need to see to others. And that was an important factor within our organization in the 80s, the comradeship, and working together for the common good of humanity.
That's brilliant. What is we're speaking in the broader spectrum now of Mustadafin. I heard you talk about health. I heard you spoke about health. You spoke about women, about kids, about education. What about the men? We're leaving out the men here.
Well, we didn't leave out. They created all the chaos in 86. But in 1992, the organization, even though the focus was on women and children from 86, because the need was there. But in 1992, coming back into the organization as a volunteer and then becoming a full-time worker, I realized, because remember in 86, and we feed for the love of Allah, the indigent, the orphan, the captive, saying that we feed you for the love of Allah alone. No reward do we desire, no thanks. 1992, the organization had to go back into a drawing board and say, you know what, we've trained women, we made them self-sufficient, self-reliant as part of our vision on education.
Yes.
What is it that today, in 1992, the abuse of women has still not changed? And I mean, to date, that is still a phenomenal program that we're still sitting with. So 1992, going to the drawing board, is saying Allah will not change the condition of man until they change what is within themselves. So re-looking at the program and re-looking at our vision is making human beings self-sufficient, self-reliant and independent through education, and that is where the inclusiveness is saying that we have to look at the family unit and not just on women and children. So you'll find that our programs changed over that period of time, and then incorporating self-sufficiency programs where we actually trained men as well as women on the programs that in order for them to become with small business, and that was incorporating everyone and not just looking at individuals, particularly women and children, but those were still the main focus, because we wanted to make women an empowered human being in educating, because it's always been that, you know, you don't have to send your girls to school. So we needed to reverse that particular program, because education becoming the main focus of our vision is that we're educating human beings how to live with other human beings, and not just on a process, we're individualistic approach to that. So you'll find 93, 4, we worked on those particular programs. 96, we then had to relook at the organization and says, we see to undernourished children, we see to malnourished children. Then Dr. Nafsa was very much involved in the sense of the HIV/AIDS awareness, even though it wasn't a very high thing where people focused on as it was many years later. But we were looking on the prevention of that. You know, in the times what we call undernourished and malnourished children, kwashiorkor was used, the word kwashiorkor was used. So you look at the transformation of the organization within the broader framework as well of our community. And that is how we as an organization grew. So the health then with in partnership with SACLA, trained, like I mentioned earlier, trained healthcare workers. We then moved beyond just the training and creating awareness and feeding to education. And those were part and parcel of the organization. And you look, like I said, 96, going back to the drawing board, it says, what is it that we can do differently? We were still an organization who also still assisted and reacted whenever there was disaster relief. So you found us everywhere and doing quite a bit of things. And there the formation of our 5 core functions, which was healthcare, education, community development, poverty alleviation, even though we on our drawing board said poverty eradication, because that was the main focus, and disaster relief. And that is how in the end we also partnered with disaster disaster relief in order to do disaster work, and we partnered with the city on disaster relief. And that is how the organization grew. And within the 5 core functions, we then look at how do we, because there's an holistic approach to that, and the one doesn't work without the other. You cannot have community development without education. You cannot have education without poverty alleviation. We're very far from eradication, because that is not just bottoms up, top down. Because that has to come from a governmental perspective, from an NGO perspective. And we understanding the Western Cape, even though we're not only in the Western Cape, there was a lot of dynamics, in particularly from an educational perspective, that we had to look at. That was the ADHD child, the ADD child, the phase child, because we have a history of unfortunately, of undernourished, malnourished children before they're even born. You have it with a mother who's carrying the child. So the Western Cape in that atmosphere was already people who don't read and write. They have emotional, psychological, physical issues that needed to be dealt with. And the organization, even though there was no funding, understood that that is what we need to do, we need to look at. That education is an important factor, but hunger is still an enormous problem at it. Then there's the emotional insecurities, the psychological, the physical. And this community not necessarily understand what the other part of the world is going through, and we're already in the Western Cape, we're in Cape Town. So what people are experiencing in Khayelitsha, Delft, Tafelsig, Manenberg is not necessarily an experience that people have in areas like that, Lansdowne, Grassy Park, all those other areas that you actually found in our, particularly in Cape Town, Houtbaai. So there's the 2 Houtbaais that you're looking at. you know, there's the area that you
the
have
informal rural area
not even
side.
the informal, the community who's been there for many years. They're in this flats right at the top of a beautiful site. Further down, you actually have the other beautiful site, which is the rich and the poor.
Yes.
So you're looking at it from those particular perspectives, but you're also understanding the history of where our community comes from. Particularly the fact that alcohol and the face and the child has had an enormous backlog.
Yes.
And they gave birth to children.
Yeah. And the generation just
and
grows.
The generation
and grows.
has grown from that particular perspective, which has an enormous amount of impact. Couple that with the issues of drugs.
Yes.
And that has not made our opposition easier. It made the challenges far more worse. So those are the things that constantly we have to go back and looking at. So education, poverty alleviation, community development was a circle in itself. And then health, because there's the issue of mental health that is very much part and parcel of our problems. And due to drugs, due to the fact that there is mental problems, couple that with drugs, so you have an enormous issue that needs to be dealt with. So the organization currently goes back and forth in saying what is it that we can do differently within the 5 core functions of our existence.
I heard you were talking about the timeline. I heard about 1996, 1994. I love these old timeline, and I know in those timelines there must be important events that took place. I want to know by you, what has Mustadafin been dealing with in terms of challenges through the timeline as well as success stories? I'm sure everybody wants to know the challenges and then also success stories.
The challenges for us has been enormous, because like I mentioned, the challenges as mentioned now was the issue of gangsterism, drugs, and the whole phase ADD and AD. But the worst challenge was that the community did not see the work that we do.
Yeah.
Because they only saw us as an organization who feed. Yes, we feed 50,000 people daily through our ECDs, through our feeding schemes, through the programs that we run, through the support that we give other people. Those are the things. But they didn't see us as an organization who actually had the educational programs. So the challenge has always been the fact that we were not always exposed, because we were a very small team. There was never money. The major challenge has always been that there was never money. The community of Western Cape sees Mustadafin Foundation is where they can bring all their second-hand clothing, their crockery, and alhamdulillah for that, their food. We survived, and we placed those things and made it into the possibility of who and what we are as an organization today. And I must say, with very little money, I'm always saying, imagine if we had funding to do what we were doing. So there's been those challenges in the sense that you're not recognized because you're a woman, and you're from a particular community, because those all plays as the major challenges within the community, not just the Western Cape, but also nationally. So it was going onto a bus, trying to raise funds in Gauteng with partners in Gauteng, and it wasn't an easy thing. So what women dressed in this way go door to door and raise funds in the 90s? And wasn't an easy task to do, but it's something which it was a challenge. I went out there and I did it. I would go out there and we would just raise funds in order to cover an overdraft. And we had like a 30,000 rand overdraft, and we cover that, and we had a bit to run a particular program, and that program is run. And I must say the Gauteng community has always been the few that I would interact and meet has been a supportive team to that. But you've also had challenges where people are saying, what's a woman doing on the road raising funds? And the worst challenges most of it came from women. Who kind of blocked you, and then they ask you what is Mustadafin, what you're doing, and you give this lapsus way of what we are doing, and they stake out and they give you this 5 rand, and it's just the way people would do it. It was not necessarily the 5 rand. It's just the way it was given to you. And I always say, but alhamdulillah, shukr for that. And this is where the organization has been and has continued working with those particular things.
I'm hearing you speaking a lot in your personal experiences, and that is great. It's great. I always maintain that it's so quick for people to give that 100 rand that 200 rand. But Allah chooses people, He chooses people to do community work. And alhamdulillah, it looks like He has chose you because you came from a long, long time.
Yeah, and 1992 it was myself and a driver and a field worker and our healthcare workers. That was 5-7 years in the going. Then we had a secretary, and so there was executive, but the team was a team who made things happen.
Yeah.
So for a very long time, yes, it was Khairunisa who actually went out there, and now I can't say that. Now I have a team of we are probably 86 people.
Alhamdulillah.
You know, we've partnered with the EPWP workers. We partnered with NACCW with training Isibindi child and youth care workers, and that is the team. If I look at Mr. Rafin, and when you asked what was the highlight,
yeah,
we've trained so many women,
and that is actually one of my next questions to you, because I know I wanted to ask you, did this empower you, did this strengthen you, did this give you the drive to encourage other people as well as women and volunteers to do what you are doing?
We would not be able to do what we're doing if it wasn't for our volunteers over the years. And it was that lady from Manenberg, that auntie from Elsie's River in Atlantis that came all the way to tell you, yes, my 50 rand a day, they got their pension.
Yes.
And the lady who makes a pot of beans food. And the support of my family. I mean, seriously, they were all part and make this organization what it is today. And volunteerism, I mean, people always say we must go back to volunteerism. This organization, the amount of volunteers that we have, that is not volunteers anymore because they buy you every day. They're in that organization every day doing the best that they can and make things happen. And without them, we would not be able to do what we're doing. So how can you feed 15,000 people?
The support structure is very, very good on your side.
From a supporting perspective.
And environment?
I look at the building that we are in now. I mean, we had to leave the place where we had to, and here comes miracle. And Gattis came on board and says, you've got this premises for the next 2 years. Everything just fell into place. While we move into this place, things just come in. And if you go into Muslafin office and you say, wow, you know, it's look at this. But I can also look at the team. I mean, you're looking at women who stood in the queue, who are now employed by this organization as early childhood development teachers, trained, level 5, as community-based carers and home-based carers. Those who were not able to read and write are now doing their matric. So the transformation within its organization has been phenomenal, but headed by women. And those are things that is changing, because now, for the 3 years ago, when we went in partnership for the ECBN and train child and youth care workers to work in the lifespan of families and children in particular, we encountered 1,000 children not in school. Wow. But with that, we also found a lot of other issues. So we had to employ a psychologist.
Yes.
So we got a full-time psychologist on board. We had to get more qualified people on board, and not people who were trained by the organization, but people who come out there. So you had a volunteer like Munib who volunteered, left his work in the retail and went to go study at UCT as a social worker. He's a qualified social worker. He's employed by the organization, but he always volunteered prior to that.
These qualified people, you speak of the psychologists, the healthcare, the education, your education people, are they working for Mustarafin? Is it
full-time employed by the organization now?
So they get in those kids and they do follow-up, regular follow-ups, not just a once off.
They work in the lifespan of the child. They are these are women from Tafelsig. There's one male from Tafelsig. Tafarid always gets just pushed into the days. But as a child and youth care worker, 3 years ago they went for training while they were being employed, while they were working in the lifespan of the child. They still were being traders, and they are now qualified. We had a big do for them in handing over their certificates. With everything, they are now qualified child and youth care workers. They can now take that certificate, go and study at UWC, whether they want to become social workers or study whatever in the field that they want. They've been motivated to go and study further. So some of them, because of the initiation of our learning center that we started off in Freedom Park in a hall, and at times having to lie flat because it's going to be gang shooting now, you find that the organization has transformed, and 300 children who's never been in school of those children are now in mainstream school. Yesterday, 16 of our new lot of children were tested by the educational department, and they're going to be placed in schools. The brightest of the sparks, I'm not saying that they're all, but the brightest of the spark, the only reason why we have not placed her got her into a mainstream school is because trying to get her birth certificate. So it wasn't just the fact that they were not in school. Because the child and youth care workers work in the lifespan of the child, they see that the child goes to school, they see that they go to madrasa, to church, to mosque, that there's aftercare, that there are parks. We've also partnered with the councillors in the area to make sure that we actually have parks, because there was never parks in the areas. So safe parks. So part of the SCBND program is to actually have safe parks. We have the aftercare, and all children can be part of the aftercare. But we see that the child gets its maintenance grant, disability grants if they have not received those particular things, gets their birth certificates, get them registered, get them into mainstream school. So if you look at those particular things, and these are all in the lifespan of the child, that is how we encountered the massive abuse, emotionally, psychologically, physical, that is happening in our community. And it's not statistically there. It's not newsworthy, because it happens all the time, unless 16 days of activism works. Then you find all of this. But this is happening every day in the lives of our child. So there's a lot of things that the organization has put into place to support the work that we are doing. Therefore, our social workers, our psychologists, to make sure that those particular things are happening.
Is there a safe house for women and children?
Not from Mustadafin, but there are safe houses for children. Not enough. Unfortunately, not enough. The reality out there is that we need more safe houses. But do you need to have more safe houses, or do you need to make your community safe?
Yes, I think that's a big question that you guys
So those are the things that we need to look at. So we are looking at how do we partner with various other organizations within the area. The issues of teenage pregnancies, the issue of prevention is better than cure. The HIV/AIDS issue, the drug issue, because it's just one of those, it just seems to be growing spirally out of control. And the reality is there has to be something that needs to be done. And it's not just one NGO that can do it. Collectively, we will have to make a stand and say advocacy, because that's where we come from. Changed to let people change, and that is where our educational programs come on, educating human beings how to live with other human beings. So Mustadafin's motto is not, everybody knows Mustadafin's motto in the Western: if every man helps his neighbor, then who will need help? Although one thing that is probably not out there is that we educate human beings how to live with other human beings from an early childhood development particular program in our learning center, and also in adult in our literacy programs. Like I mentioned, a lot of our women who's now employed were once in the queue. Some of them could not read and write. Some of them also who have not been in school are now literate, are now able to read and write, are able to go to mainstream schools, are doing their matric. So education is very much within the vision and the mission of the organization.
And I would say hashtag independence.
Hashtag independence. We had a hashtag feed the mind, feed the belly, as a very important structure within the organization to make things sure that yes, we do need to feed, and there's still children who goes to bed hungry, but we also want to make sure that the mind is fed, so that children can make the right choices, do the right thing, and have an opportunity to grow, and also as a collective, our community as well. Because if we educate one person, and that is the one thing I found in the learning center in Tafel, it impacted in the parents as well. And where parents are saying, if my child is able to read and write and I cannot be supportive, I need to go and learn as well. But you know what? I can also stop my drugging. And you actually found mothers, because out of the learning center became the support structure for the parents. And out of that support structure for the parents came the parental workshops.
Shukran so much, Auntie Hajaabi, for enlightening me about the broad spectrum of mustarafin and also what it means. I self didn't know, but you have enhanced my knowledge and the amazing work that you were doing and are doing. And may mustarafin grow from strength to strength, inshallah.
Inshallah, Kouthar, I always feel I don't do justice to my organization, but let's hope our community sees
this
that
most certainly won't be the last. We're going to assist wherever we can, inshallah. And the banking details for mustarafin will be on the screen shortly, so do not move from where you're sitting. Auntie Hajaabi, once again, shukran so much for attending. And like I said, it's not going to be the end of us. We are going to assist where we can, inshallah. And everything of the best.
Shukran jazilan.
Well, there you have it. That is Auntie Hajaabi Johnson Kasim, all the way from mustarafin. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.